Gentlemen, the time has come once again to discuss things.
Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of Geeky Gentlemen. I am Sid Part 2. Joining me today is...
A Geek for Fun.
And Steve.
And Steve. Everyone's favorite. So, there was this little movie that came out recently, and I thought, hey, this would be kind of fun to talk about. And I don't know if Alfie had heard about it coming out or not. I know he's a big Superman fan, but this one might have flown under the radar a little bit. Do you know there was a new live-action Superman movie directed and written by James Gunn?
Really?
Yeah.
Alfie, I'm really curious. I'm going to send you a picture of the costume. I'm really curious what you think of the costume.
Wow, if it's anything like the Peacemaker costume, it would be nice and simple.
Yeah, so it's been 2 years since the movie's been announced and in development, various stages. And yeah, I've heard Alfie literally just bitch for the last 2 years about this, so I was real curious what his thoughts on the movie proper were going to be. So I'm going to start with Alfie. What are your general thoughts on Superman 2025?
Why are you starting with me?
Because
let Alfie go last.
No.
Let Alfie go last.
No, I want Alfie to go first. I want to hear Alfie's thoughts first.
All right. I really did not like this movie. But the sad thing about it that I've kind of come to the realization is the lead up talking about it is more interesting to dissect and had a little bit more of a creative value than the movie itself. So I don't know how much I can dig into the movie without just kind of bringing up little nerdy pet peeve critiques, because my biggest issue with the whole thing is it feels shallow. This Superman movie, kind of in contrast to the rest of James Gunn's work, which I'm not a fan of, feels the most safe, feels the most that he kind of reined himself in and gave the Superman of the comics, and specifically the Superman of the 90s comics, which inherently isn't a bad idea, especially after we had a more divisive DC universe to lead with that. But I can't say I have any excitement about that. I can't say that I have anything really interesting to say beyond just, I don't think James Gunn's very funny. I really don't like this new directorial style he's doing with his cinematographer. He kind of did it more in Guardians 3 and Suicide Squad, and I think it kind of worked a little bit better in those movies. So every aspect about this, except for the cast, I kind of was preemptively worried about. I'm I don't know if this is going to go. I don't think this is going to be interesting for me. And then when it came out, it was exactly like I thought it was going to be. So there's no real surprises. No one's shocked if you've seen anything. You kind of already knew what my opinion was going to be. I guess just the disappointing part that is kind of anticlimactic is, aside from just really small, oh, I hate this choice is stupid, rah, 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 nerd bullshit, I don't really have anything else to say about it because there's nothing really here for me. It's kind of also why I don't really want to start as the first person, because that's a really boring way to start a review. It's just, it's a very shallow movie that exists, and I didn't find very funny or very entertaining, and that's kind of the long answer for that short response.
Okay.
Damn.
How about you, Steve? What are your general thoughts on Superman?
I have a lot of issues with the movie, but overall I really liked it. I had a lot of fun with this. I had a smile on my face the entire time. Before the movie was coming out, this was the first time where I felt like in several years where people at work were like talking about a Superman movie and like talking about the idea of going to see it and stuff. And my coworker asked me before I went to go see it if I could let them know if this was good for their 6-year-old. And when I heard that, I'm like, what the fuck do you mean? What do you mean will it be good for your 6-year-old? It's a Superman movie. Superman's for 6-year-olds. But then you put it into context and it's like, 10 seasons of Smallville, Man of Steel, Batman vs. Superman, Superman Returns. We haven't had a proper you take your kid to a Superman movie in the entire 21st century. So when I got a chance to watch it and then report back to my friend like, hey, yes, take your 6-year-old. This movie's a blast. That just kind of made me feel really good because it was such a simple, optimistic movie. I think it's got a lot of issues, particularly in like I think Clark's arc isn't very good, and I think he's a little too passive throughout the movie. And then I've got some issues here and there about like the way the movie's structured. But overall, I had a really good time with this. I like it about as much as I like his Suicide Squad movie, although Suicide Squad had a bit of a tighter script, I think. And I like James Gunn's big visual swing with this. It doesn't look great all the time, but I think it is a swing, and I think it leads to some really good effect here and there. The scene where Superman punches a dude and his teeth fly out into the camera and bounce off the lens, that shit is so cool. I really enjoyed it overall, but yeah.
Okay. For me, I really, really liked this movie. I'm sure that, like, as I sit on it more, I'll find more wrong with it, but just, like, walking out of the theater, I was just so happy to have a Superman movie that felt, you know, just happy to be about superheroes. It's so interesting how this film kind of exists in like a filmmaker's conversation in a lot of ways, and it is a response to the DCEU Superman as much as at least Man of Steel was like a response to Superman Returns. You know, like the big complaint with Superman Returns was, oh, he doesn't do anything cool, he doesn't like fight anyone, it's just flying around, it feels like we're still stuck in the 70s. So there's like that big epic fight between Superman and Zod, and it takes out the whole city, blah, blah, blah. And then this is like, you know, the big complaint about Man of Steel is, oh, no one cared about the civilians, and there's no, like, heart to the action, and just, you know, two action figures punching each other for no reason, and Superman kills a guy at the end. So this goes out of its way to, like, you know, give you really cool bombastic action, but also, oh, everyone left the city, so it's fine, and look, here's him saving people as they're trying to leave the city, and so, like, it's got a bit of the self-consciousness that tends to annoy me about films, but at the same time, it's trying to, like, do it as a response and kind of check itself, which is funny because James Gunn made Guardians 1, and that was one of the movies that, like, people cited as, see, Superman doesn't care about the civilians in Man of Steel, blah, blah, blah. But I think the best thing I can say about this movie is walking out of it, it was the first movie that it was the first superhero movie in the better part of a decade that I've decided I want to go see in theaters a second time. Because I haven't wanted to do that since Black Panther. And it's the first movie to, like, recapture that same energy in a really long time for me. Because I used to love doing that for a bunch of these when they were coming out, and I haven't done it for anything since. Part of it's because, you know, kids, but also just, you know, look at the fucking movies that have come out since. They're not that good. So this just, like, captured a certain, like, attitude and just heart to it. Also, it just, I think one of the more controversial decisions, based on some of the reaction I was seeing leading up to it, was the fact that it's not focused on an origin. You know, you're starting with a pre-established DC universe. You're starting with you know, this Superman has been around for, you know, a short time, but, like, in comic book terms, 3 years can be like 3 decades if shit's going down every other day, like it seems to be in this universe. So it's really, really just so cool to get a superhero universe like that just from go. because that's something that I've always really loved about DC, and it just always feels right to just start in the middle of it. Everyone's already established. I don't really care about the origin. We kind of all know it already, so let's just move on and tell a more interesting story instead of repeating the same beats over and over again. So I really appreciated it for that, and I had a really, really good time watching this.
Hopping off the origin bit there, something that I really like about this, like you said, it's in conversation with Man of Steel, but then Man of Steel, as much as it's like in response to Superman Returns, it's even more so, I think, like a direct crib on Batman Begins, because it's trying to do for Superman what Batman Begins did for Batman. And by the same token, I think this Superman movie is trying to do what the Batman did for Batman, where you start him in the middle of an adventure, you're doing it as like your big relaunch of the series, yada yada yada. But the Batman does the same thing, where it's allegedly not an origin story because Batman's been around for 2 years at that point. But as you watch that movie, it's like just straight up an origin movie. It's the first time Batman goes to a crime scene with the police and Jim Gordon. That's why everyone's so uncomfortable there. It's the first time he's fighting the Riddler. The Joker he's fought in the past, but he's clearly not the Joker that we would come to see in whatever sense. Penguin's not really the Penguin yet until the end of the movie. The mob is still in control, but they lose out to the freaks at the end of the movie so that you get the Gotham you recognize. The Batman is in more ways than people give it credit for, a straight up origin movie for that version of the universe. Whereas this Superman movie, I think, is, for good and bad, not an origin movie in the slightest, because it presumes your knowledge or emotional investment in all of these characters from the get-go. Guy Gardner's just Guy Gardner, he's just around. Mr. Terrific is just Mr. Terrific, and he's just around. Superman, Lois, all of the characters play kind of two-dimensionally as the figures of a Superman story that we recognize. And the movie never really gives you a chance to adjust to any of them because it's always going a mile a minute. And I think there is trouble with that approach here and there. Like I said, I think the biggest problem is Clark's arc is so passive because things are just happening to him all the time. But I can only dislike that so much because every Superman movie outside of, well, really even the Christopher Reeve movies, every Superman movie does this. So it's not a unique problem. And because you're just constantly hit with something new every couple of minutes, it almost doesn't give you a chance to like miss the depth that you might want for certain characters. From the start, you get these titles dropping of like, there have been metahumans for like 3,000 years, and Superman arrived on Earth like 30 years ago, and he's been Superman for 3 years, and yada, yada, yada. But you get all of this info dump about the universe. You see Superman, you see Krypto, you see the Fortress of Solitude, you see the Superman robots, you see or are about to see Ultraman, all in the span of like 5 minutes. So it just does not give you a chance to orient. And I think that is kind of genuinely part of the fun and part of why I like the visual style of this, because it is just so you are thrown into this and everything feels like it's being thrown at you at once.
See, and I really like that about it because that's it's a hard vibe to get and it scares people away, but it is one of the things I truly love about comics. Just that feeling of you can just jump in the middle of a story arc or a series and all these like characters just exist and have like this whole history. And sometimes the fun of it is not actually going back to read every single appearance. I know that's blasphemy to you, Steve, but not going back to read every single issue, but just kind of like letting your brain fill in the dynamics and fill in who these people are and their history together based on what you're reading now. And what your ideas are just about the characters from like general vibes. Instead of Bizarro Zod, it's general vibes.
That's good. That's good.
Something about that idea though that I liked. I like the idea and concept as well, just dropping you straight in and just letting things play out, and then like having like world building or supplemental material where you can kind of fill the in, but you just kind of just you allow people to just kind of get it, and that's why we're using like the John Williams theme again, because you're playing with the idea that people know like the icon of Superman. Just on a craft level though, something I kept running into that I really didn't like about that is you want to do that, but then especially in that first 10 minutes, there is so much heavy exposition for characters literally saying their motives and their backstories, and I'm just like, can you just let it play out if you want to just drop us right here? Like, why is the engineer exclaiming one of her only lines is explaining who she is and what, and then Lex does a pitch meeting about who she is and what she is, and then in the moment where Lex is like commanding things like, oh yeah, he can read Superman's movie. It's like, why don't you just let it play out then if you want to let it play out? Why are you stopping the movie every 5 seconds to... And there's that big thing that happens a lot throughout the script, is there is so much random clunky exposition dialogue that it hurts that appealing concept, right, of just letting it flow and you get swept up in it. But I couldn't get swept up in it because I already know all these characters, so when you sit here and explain it to me, it just halts the movie dead.
I would agree that I think the exposition is clunky at times. Not to jump straight to the end of the movie, but the example that I have in mind is right at the end of the movie with Supergirl showing up, and you get the whole like, she goes to get drunk on planets with red sun because our bodies can't process red sunlight, and so it gets rid of our powers, and we can't get drunk on Earth. And I'm like, yeah, but you're saying that to your robot buddies that are literally like healing your body right now, so they know your biology. And like, I definitely agree, Alfie, that I think that is like very apparent, and that's probably one of those things that will annoy me more in time on rewatches than it will for like this one. What it reminds me of, Steve, you brought up Batman Begins earlier. You remember the guy who's like over and over again talking about how the train is gonna get to the Wayne Center
building?
Dude,
yes!
It's like...
They just like literally, they show the train, and he's like, if that train gets to that tower, it's gonna cause a chain... Like, it's so clunky, it's so funny.
Yeah, they just keep hammering on that one point over and over again. Like, they cut back to that dude, I think, like, at least 3 times, and he's giving no more exposition, no more new information.
Nolan has never exposited more than he has with the microwave emitter in Batman Begins. There's no less than like 3 whole scenes explaining what the fuck it does.
Yeah, no. And so like that was this thing where like, when I decided to watch all the Batman movies in one day after having watched them all, like, fairly recently, so this was, like, my 3rd watch through within, a couple weeks of each other, then I noticed it, and it, like, really stood out and, like, became awkward. Now I can't, like, help but notice it and kind of giggle at it. So I feel like that's gonna be kind of my takeaway, but I did notice that they were, like, really leaning into explaining a lot of stuff. But I don't think that negates the you're just in it thing, because they're not explaining like, this character comes from here. They're explaining how this thing works. At least that's the general vibe I had for it.
I agree with you about the clunky exposition for sure, but where I push back is I don't think that it stops the movie. I think with the way the exposition is handled, it's almost like voiceover in old shitty detective movies, where the voiceover exists to explain things that we did not film. So the things just keep happening on frame, but the voiceover tells you what you need to know while other things are happening. In this, there's a lot of bad, clunky exposition, but there's always so much going on at the time of the bad, clunky exposition that you're trying to get adjusted to what you're watching as you're hearing the exposition. So it feels like the movie just keeps moving, at least for me. So it never felt like it was holding me up. I think with the exposition, it's probably the worst with the Superman robots, because their introduction in the Fortress of Solitude is almost entirely exposition. And then when we cut back to them, like you said, at the end with Supergirl, it's also just heavy exposition before she leaves and we go back to the scene. There's a lot of that throughout the movie where it seems like characters are just kind of like in one-liners explaining to you what they do or what their purpose is. But because it's always either sandwiched between or happening simultaneous with something else, that still kind of works for me. And the stuff that isn't exposited but is just kind of part of the character's behavior, I think counterbalances that and makes it work, like Lex. I love Lex in this movie. I think Nicholas Hoult does a tremendous job. And it's the first time I think we've ever had a really good live action balance between he is both the mad scientist and the evil businessman. He just plays both of those things expertly. And he's got that thing with Ultraman where he's watching the fight and then skewing out codes of how he wants him to fight, like he's playing a video game. And that's a thing that they do constantly, but it's not a thing that I feel like is ever over-explained. It's just something that you're watching Nicholas Hoult do, and you're watching the impacts on Superman, and it sets up that dynamic of this is who this guy is, and this is what his power over Superman essentially is, of how he's able to predict him down to this level of just creating fight codes and to know exactly what he needs to do every single time Superman moves. Also, sidebar, I love that one of the codes for fighting Superman is kick him in the balls. That's so good.
I like all the code stuff as well. I think that is a good example of one where that approach did work. On Holt's Lex, I guess we can kind of segue that into the cast. He was the one part of this where, like, at first when he got cast, I remember talking to Steve about it, I wasn't really sold at him, but since then I've watched more of his movies, so in the lead up to him, he was kind of the one part I was like, oh, I'm gonna love this guy, like, at least I'll have this dude, he's gonna be good. And, like, he was fine. There was just something about it that just didn't... on paper, right, he's got all the elements I've wanted for the longest time, and there's a scene he has which I loved, but it's just there's just something about it that just isn't... I've seen him do more intimidating. I've seen him that it's not like he gets undercut, but like there's just like something off about him where he didn't achieve the heights I wanted him to achieve. I guess is my thing. I think he absolutely can. I think he fully grown into him as a great cast for Lex, but in this movie, for me at least, he just kind of leveled out to just like, okay, he was okay. He was alright.
It'll be interesting because this movie seems to be doing pretty well financially, so maybe the DC universe on film is saved. I've also heard people saying it didn't even make as much money as Man of Steel adjusted for inflation. Blah 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 blah. This seems to have pretty good word of mouth. This seems to be doing pretty well, so maybe we will have a DC universe. It'll be interesting to see characters like Lex and the wider cast, and how they appear and act under different direction. Because I think like one of the things James Gunn's been pretty adamant about is wanting to kind of empower different visions and not have things feel too samey movie to movie, to have different characters' movies and shows and stuff actually feel like they're, different visions from different directors. So it'll be interesting to see how these castings will play, where they're playing the same character, but conceptually with a very different drive to them behind the camera. So Holt will definitely be one of the characters I'm really interested to see come back in something else.
Yeah, me too.
Did you have, like, since you are like more negative on it, did you have any performances that you did really enjoy?
Yeah, I really, really loved Mr. Terrific in this. I thought Mr. Terrific was fantastic. I think all of his stuff was great. I liked his action set piece. I liked all of his lines were actually really funny. That's a tough role to play like that, and that's a tough look to pull off on screen, but I think everything about him really impressed me. I would like to see, if Gunn's going to do more stuff going forward, I'd like to see him do like a Justice Society or Justice League International or Terrifics or something with that cast. I think would play to his strengths a little bit more, at least for stuff I think he's better at. But I really like Mr. Terrific in this. I really liked, for the 2 seconds that he's on screen, I like Steve Lombard quite a bit.
He's so good.
I liked the James Gunn's dog that played Crypto. I thought did a good job as well. I liked all the Crypto stuff. I didn't have a problem with Rachel Brosnahan or anything. I think I just wish she kind of got a little bit more to do. But she was good. I knew she was going to be a great cast from when they got. I just didn't think they really played to her strengths, and she kind of felt like she got kind of sidelined a lot for showcase like Mr. Terrific and the other stuff. I think there was something else I was missing with just like in terms of performance wise. I think that kind of covered Nathan Fillion is playing Guy Gardner exactly how Guy Gardner should be played, right? It's not character really careful, but like you can't say he's not playing him accurately. Like,
oh no, it was fantastic. I finally like Guy Gardner in something.
That bit at the end of when he lets Metamorpho into the Justice Gang because he likes the name.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic.
That's so funny.
No, the Guy Gardner moment that really sold me was flipping over the tanks with a middle finger thing.
Oh, like, yeah, that was good.
That was like, okay, iconic. And he's got just like, oh, but that's just effects. But now you believe that's the one he's making with just the way that he's walking with like just the Guy Gardner swagger. Like, I can't wait to see someone kick this dude's ass, but at the same time...
I was interested in what you thought of how the constructs and stuff look like in this movie, and that was the moment I was thinking about when I saw them on the screen. I was like, I wonder what Ian thinks of... It's the first time we've seen Green Lantern do Green Lantern shit on screen since the Ryan Reynolds movie.
I think they look almost identical to the design language of constructs that they used in the Green Lantern movie. Like, when you... Like, the Green Lantern movie got shit on because, all the CGI looks terrible, blah, blah, blah. But, like, when you actually, look at stuff, and you're not always meant to go frame by frame with CG, but it can help to highlight certain things. So, like, the one that I'll just go to because it's quick is when Ryan Reynolds is fighting those guys in the parking lot, and he throws his first construct, and it's just like a fist that punches. It's not just, a transparent green fist in, like, a cartoony way. They actually go through and they give like the fist pores and veins, and you can actually see the texture of skin as a part with like it just looks like green glowing energy, but it still looks like skin. And I think that's a lot of what you're seeing with the way Guy Gardner's doing things. I would be curious to like go through and pause the frames of those hands and middle finger that he's throwing up and see, because it looks like they're doing the exact same thing with a lot of the other constructs, like the muzzle and the oven mitts that he puts on the kaiju. It's got like that same thing. The muzzle looks like metal but made out of green energy. The oven mitts look like fabric with like the stitched pattern but made out of green energy. They don't look cartoony, they do look realistic, just with a green overlay almost. So I think it looks exact. I think they figured it out back in 2011 and just no one wanted to admit it.
That's pretty fun.
I did like that we were seeing stuff that wasn't just green energy blast or
the
big punch.
Yep, they actually like give him constructs. He's got. Well, I made oven mitts. That was really fucking cute. Although
on Guy, you mentioned like you liked him just kind of being an asshole, but I also really like the bit where after Superman goes into the building after he hears the recording of his parents, and Guy basically, without giving him any time to cool whatsoever, he's just like, "Hey, is that true? Because if it is, I'm going to take you down." And they had that stare down. Mm-hmm. I really loved that. That felt so comic booky to me.
Yeah, 100%. Like, again, that's the thing I really enjoyed about this movie, not just as a Superman movie, because, let's face it, that guy can't carry a movie by himself. But as, like, as an introduction...
Try it, huh?
As an introduction to, like, a DC universe, I think it just works really, really well to get that, like... Steve, you and I have talked about this. The ultimate DC scene is... two superhero characters sitting together in a restaurant in costume and eating apple pie. And, like, I don't think any other version of the characters on film could do it outside of this new universe, Like, even Christopher Reeve movies, like, maybe, but still, like, not with anyone else. Like, you can't put the iconic, what if pair of Reeve and Burton in a diner together. It just wouldn't sell right. Like, you can't do that. Definitely can't do it with like Bale and Ralph. Wouldn't work with Affleck and Cavill. Blah blah blah. But I could see, you could put this version of Superman and like Guy Gardner or whoever the fuck else in a diner eating pie in costume, and that just would just be the vibe.
That's kind of what I like about it. Like, you remember a while ago we were talking about that DC animated movie with Damien and John Kent, and I had a hard time talking about it. I was kind of an asshole about it because I'm just like, I don't know, it's a kids movie, whatever. This is that, but not in a derogatory sense. This is just a cartoon. This is just like an episode of Brave and the Bold. I mean, pocket dimensions, evil super intelligent monkeys trolling people on Twitter, Metamorpho with a weird baby Metamorpho, a supervillain disguised as another supervillain disguised as another supervillain. There's so much about this that's just like dumb cartoon logic that I have a really hard time like holding anything about it on like a narrative level kind of against it, because it does sort of feel like the thing you'd pop on watching Saturday morning cartoons or like an old Superman comic. I was reading contrary to Alfie, I wasn't reading any good Superman comics leading up to this movie. I was reading a bunch of 70s Superman comics. I was reading the Dennis O'Neil run, and then I went backwards and read a lot of the stuff at the end of the Silver Age leading up to the Dennis O'Neil run. And the movie really gave me that vibe. It gave me that very like sort of authentic Silver Age-y flavor. And people throw around Silver Age a lot as just kind of a catch-all when things are goofy, and that's usually not the case. But when you're talking about like nonsensical sci-fi concepts that we never come back to, that are never explained but just kind of exist, that's a very Silver Age thing. And that's kind of why I enjoyed the movie, is because it had this very clear like, I'm picking up Action Comics 100 something and just watching Superman do shit. And there's a sort of a charm and a joy to it where it's like, I am watching this movie a mile a minute and enjoying myself, and I'm smiling, and I really like David Cornsweet's Superman, and I love the way he says what the hey and good gosh and all that, and then it's over. Sheesh. And I walk out the theater and I never have to think about it again.
Sheesh, golly.
I love Cornsweet's Superman, man. He's so good.
Yeah.
Let's talk about his performance then, and how kind of his version of Superman, because we're probably going to be with him for a long time. And he seems to be the first one since Reeve that has really won over the general public. He seems to be the guy that like really has a lot of people excited about, and he's doing all the press tour interviews and stuff. So I think he's
talking about Qui-Gon Jinn on the interviews.
Yeah.
Right, I think he's worth talking about in terms of like, if this is the start of the new DC universe, he's probably going to be positioned as like the RDJ, or maybe even a better comparison, because RDJ just kind of had that insane level of hype. I think more so is kind of like with the Arrowverse and how they treated Green Arrow. I think that's kind of what they'll treat Cornsweet like. So let's talk about his version of the soups.
I liked it a lot. It was funny. I had to go to the grocery store the day after, and because of the way I rotate my clothes, I still had my Superman shirt on. And I was just, checking out at the grocery store, and one of the girls bagging up my stuff goes, "Oh, did you see the new one yet?" I'm like, yeah, it was really good. It's like, "Oh, who's the guy playing Superman?" I'm like, "David Cornsweet." And she goes, "Oh, okay. Is he good?" I'm like, "Yeah, no, he's great. I think he's the best we've had." Another girl was working the register, and she goes, "Is he better than Henry? Because I really loved Henry." I'm like, I think so, but so it's just, I haven't had that kind of interaction just with random, bystanders in public about one of these things in a long fucking time. I think that this movie, for one reason or another, has really captured the public in a way that I haven't seen one of these do since maybe Endgame, and probably before that. So it's just really interesting in that regard. So to roll that more into Cornsweet's performance, I thought he was really, really fun to watch. I enjoyed the casual funness, and I enjoyed how he can do broody Superman without it feeling like overpowering or like nihilistic like Henry Cavill's version got to. Like, I can never imagine this version of Superman going, "No one stays good in this world for long," kind of vibe. So again, it's hard to talk about without comparing it directly to what we've had not only before but what we've had relatively recently. And it is kind of funny to like contrast it particularly with like Justice League Superman, because I think that is the closest comparison of like how Cornsweat's written versus how like Henry Cavill wanted to be written.
Yeah.
And so like even when like Henry Cavill was having fun with it and getting to be more of like all smiles Superman, I don't think that he got to do as much or got to like have as much fun as like Cordsweat seems to be having here. I've seen, you know, videos of the cast floating around. They all seem to be pretty happy with each other to one degree or another. I try not to watch too much of that material, but like there does seem to just be a genuine like really happy to be here kind of vibe. Vibe's my favorite word tonight apparently. Feeling going on with this cast and Cornsweat in particular, and I think that comes through in the performance. I think the Supergirl scene shows that really well, where there's, you know, he's playing like concerned and like poo-pooing older cousin, brother, whatever kind of attitude, and yet there's like this kind of underlying thing of like, gosh, this is just so cool to be here attitude that I'm seeming to glean from it.
He's got such an infectious smile, and there's something about the visual of an infectious smile with a guy who looks like Superman and is dressed like Superman that can get you so much latitude from me that I didn't think was possible. He really has like this quintessential like I'm a nice guy energy all the way through, and even when he's brooding and even when he's down a little bit, that kind of comes through. Like when he's talking to Lois in his apartment while the Justice Gang is fighting an interdimensional imp in the background, because that's just things that happen.
Again, like that's just such a good thing.
I know. And she's like, "Should you help?" And he's like, "Nah, they've got it." But
which is just the most comic book thing ever, right?
I know, I love it. But as they're having that conversation, and then he's getting ready to go surrender himself to the police, and he has that line where he's like, he doesn't like Crypto, he's not a very good dog, but he's out there alone and scared. That felt so resonant to me. One of the big problems I have with every Superman outside of Christopher Reeve, and maybe outside of Tyler Hoechlin, I don't know, that one's a little up in the air because of how that show goes. But outside of those two...
Because he can fly.
Right. Outside of those two, my big problem with Superman lately has been I'm really against this idea that Superman is this cosmically important figure, this Jesus allegory, this greatest being in the universe designed to kind of guide us to the light or whatever. Grant Morrison has this line in Super Gods where he's like, before it was a bomb, it was an idea. Superman, however, was a better idea. And I'm so kind of sick of that perspective on that character. And Cornsweat's version not having the sort of like broody responsibility of power that Cavill and Routh have, that Routh even has in Crisis on Infinite Earths when he does a much better job as Superman. Even that one's kind of got that broody self-importance. The entire run of Smallville is just Tom Welling being broody self-important. But Cornsweat doesn't have that. He just feels like a dude, and he just feels like he wants to be a nice guy. And this movie is kind of it seems like it's the first time anyone's ever questioned the idea that he can't just be a nice guy. And I have some problems with how the movie handles that idea or doesn't handle that idea at all. But again, it just kind of goes back to this notion of like, as I'm watching, I'm thinking of all these things that I feel like it doesn't do well. And then Cornsweat just smiles at the camera. I'm like, yeah, fuck it, he's Superman.
How about you, Alfie? What were your feelings on the performance here?
So I'll agree with you. I do think he's got quite a nice smile. I think like the behind the scenes stuff and some of the things like that. I think when he does that big grin is very endearing. I think he definitely looks the part. Despite that costume not really doing him too many favors, but it looks better on screen than what it was. At least it's not distracting. The main thing I have with it, and you keep bringing up the like he feels like he's a nice guy. He feels like he's just nice thing, and like while that's not a take on Superman, I think is particularly interesting. It can be a perfectly fine one, and I think after everything we've had previously, it makes sense that someone would want to do that. My issue comes up with how Gunn writes him, and this isn't consistent, but there's a couple of scenes here where it just feels like he's really, really unlikable, and I don't understand. It feels at odds with then he'll say other things. Because I really like the crypto line, right, when he says like he's alone, he's scared, like I'm gonna put myself at the line to try and look for him and find him. And then when he finds him, he's like he doesn't pet him once or anything. Like he just kind of still acts pissed off at him for some reason. The biggest example I have for me that really kind of immediately made it hard for me to root for him is the Lois argument scene. I think there's some parts in that make sense for him to get pressed, and I have no issue with Lois bringing him to a point where he feels super defensive and he feels pressed. I just don't think what was in that scene justified the severity of that reaction. I think she should have pushed him harder if that's where you wanted it to go. Stuff like super shit, making him stand up, scream, and leave the apartment just makes him feel like an asshole to me. It doesn't make me feel like he's a very nice guy, because sure, he'll save random bystanders, but if that's how he treats his girlfriend, like, that's kind of a dickhead, right? Like, that part to me felt like it was at odds with this idea of him being this person who loves everyone and beautiful, because that is the ethos of Superman, right? But how we execute it here feels like we're banking on such cultural resonance of what the character is that we're not really showing that in a palpable way in his everyday life. Part of that I have to do with, as well as the fact that there's barely any Clark Kent here. There's one scene of him as Clark Kent, and he doesn't really act any differently than how he does as Superman, and then we never go back to it, and that's a really interesting layer of the character that we're just not dealing with. And obviously, like, Reeves kind of the only person, Brandon Routh did it a little bit, that, like, really delves into that, but it comes in as a point, just because other things didn't do it, I'm not going to give you a pass as well for not doing it the same way. Does that kind of make sense? Like, I feel like you are banking on so much character work and assumption of Superman as just this nice guy who does good. And for me, at least, I think the reasons why he does good and the reason why he has a relationship with his home, the reason he has a relationship with his pen, I think those are so interesting that make him as my favorite character. And so I brush up against anything that really kind of chooses the most simple way to that. To go back to the Lois interview scene, I don't want to ramble on too much about this, but I think it kind of emphasized a lot of my problems with the movie and why it didn't gel for me. Is they bring up a really interesting point here of he wants to save lives at all costs. That's his reason for being. That's his reason for doing things. And Lois brings up, well, you can think the consequences of your actions and stuff like that, and they have a back and forth about it. And that, to me, when I watch that scene, I'm like, okay, this is setting up an arc. This is setting up for something where he may have to reckon with that. And even if he's right at the end, right, it feels like he's going to have to deal with that a little bit more. And then he doesn't. And then they never go back to that point again. They never have him have to deal with, maybe I did react too rashly to that, or maybe I didn't. Maybe I was valid. It kind of just moves at such a pace that we don't go back to stuff like that. The same thing with the big reveal about his parents. I'm not going to sit here and get into like some of the optics with that, because me and Steve talked about it a little bit preamble, but I feel like people are really overblowing this whole thing, and it's not my main issue with the movie. I've talked to a lot of people really at length about the Krypton stuff, and I'm kind of sick of having to... people get so focused on that point that I think they miss the other issues with the movie that I'm more interested in from a craft level. At that point, it's just kind of his preference, but just to quickly get into it, they make it his whole mission for being, right, with like he was sent here for a reason. This is they go through that version of the origin, and they discard it. They make it something else, and it's like, okay, that's a big swing for the cinematic version of the characters. It's the first time this version of Superman has in a movie has had to deal with that. Where's that going to go? And then it doesn't really go. You get one scene with Pa, who we've also
a good scene though.
I really disagree. I really didn't like the Kents in this. The Kents in this, I was like, what are we doing here with how they talk and how they acted? Like, maybe I'm jumping around a lot of this, but like, my main point with that is we set up interesting conflicts for him to go through, and when he does react to them, I think it's not earned. And then when we have the resolution to it, I don't think that's earned either. And it feels like we skipped a bunch of scenes going through that arc. Is kind of my overall point.
I want to get to this because I keep dancing around this point of Clark's arc, and I do want to get to what you're saying and what I think is the biggest problem with the whole movie. But before we do that, I just want to push back a little bit on the argument scene with Lois, because I really like that scene, and I really like everything with Clark and Lois in this because I feel like they feel like a real couple. They feel like two people that are in this relationship, kind of jumped in but without thinking about the consequences, and are kind of struggling through it a little bit, in part because what else I really like about this version of Superman is that Clark's kind of an idiot. Like, he sees everything in a very sort of childish way, and so when he's given any sort of pushback, he reacts kind of like a child. And then the flip side of that is that his childishness is also childish optimism and childish belief in people's goodness. So I like that. I like the chance for Superman to kind of throw a temper tantrum in a way that isn't just homicidal maniac, the way Henry Cavill's performance kind of gives me. So I'll push back on that. But to your other point, the biggest problem with this movie, I agree with you, is Clark's arc is either non-existent or done really poorly, depending on what you're looking at. Because this movie kind of excels in throwing a lot of concepts at you and then never coming back to them or never resolving them. The opening title crawl thing says that the opening of the movie is the first time Superman's ever been beaten in a fight, which is not a thing that ever matters in the movie. The fact that Lex leaks the recording, forgetting the Krypton stuff, but just the idea that the public loves Superman and has now turned against him, that's not a thing that ever comes back up in the movie. There's so much stuff that happens throughout where it seems like these are the fact that he that interview scene with Lois, the whole idea of like, what's your responsibility given that you behave in a way that gives people the impression that you act on behalf of the United States. That's also not a thing that ever really comes back and gets resolved in the movie. I think the reason that is that the movie can't ever give you an adequate conclusion to his arc because he's on the back pedal so much. Everything in this movie is always happening at him, and very little of it is ever motivated by his own choices or actions. The two things in the movie that are motivated by his actions are the fact that he went into another country to stop a foreign army, which we don't see in the movie, we were just told happens at the beginning, and the fact that he surrenders to the U.S. government. The surrender, though, doesn't even really feel like it counts to me because at that point he's so boxed in that it's kind of his only option. And so because everything is happening at him, it never gives him a chance to like push back and do something to kind of actively engage with what the themes of the movie are until the very end when he has that statement to Lex about what it means to be human. At which point I feel like that's the resolution to an arc the movie has not taken us on so far. I do think it resolves the Krypton stuff, though. I think it is pretty clear about the fact that Clark thought his entire life meant one thing, that his mission for being a good person came because of his parents. And then he realized, no, it's not his Kryptonian parents that gave him that mission. It's the tools and the wisdom that his adoptive parents gave him. And that's what changes in the fortress at the end when he's looking at home movies. And I got really emotional at the Pa Kent scene, and I got really emotional when he's just smiling watching his home videos of his adoptive parents. I think all of that works really, really well, in part because I don't think the movie... James Gunn keeps talking about Superman as an immigrant metaphor, and you and I have talked about this. I don't think Superman is a very good immigrant metaphor. So a lot of people have criticized that turn from the Kryptonian to the adoptive parents as like, Superman is arguing for why immigrants should assimilate into U.S. culture. And I think that's just a terrible read. So I don't engage with that. But I will say in the context of the movie, I like that resolution. I just think the movie has so many ideas that it never actually resolves any of them satisfyingly. So the one idea it does resolve feels kind of half-baked. And a lot of that is just hinged on the fact that Clark/Superman never really gets any agency in his own story. And again, like the Clark Kent thing, this is just kind of a problem with every Superman movie, and I wish we'd get past it. Like, even the Reeve movies, everything's always just happening at Christopher Reeve Superman. The one benefit that the original has is that every challenge he's given is something that requires him to use his powers in like either a creative way or in a way that would save the most lives or something like that. But the plot of every single one of those movies, including the Brandon Routh one, including Man of Steel and BVS, is that things are just always happening to Superman and he's always reacting to them. He's never really allowed to be the main character in a way that I think is satisfying. And that continues here, and it is a problem. But because I like so much of what Corn Sweat's doing, it doesn't bother me as much as it should.
One thing I want to go into about what you said about like the park, and I want to get Ian's take on this as well, because I've heard this so much. I've heard so many people. We went to the fair. I put my Superman costume on and stuff, and we got some waves and stuff. So it was fun to go there. We went there with another friend, and they also got weepy at the park scene. I've heard a lot of people say that on Taylor L. People said that they're crying at this movie, and I just do not understand what is making people so sad about that scene. I need you guys to explain it to me.
Because
what the fuck is so sad about it?
It's not sad. It's heartbreaking.
No,
it's a dad saying that he's proud of his son, Alfie.
Yeah! Like,
you just won't understand this because you're not an American, truly. Like, that's what the problem is.
No, there's just something... Okay, here's what I'll say, why I resonate with it. There's something about when you grow up and you're an adult and you move out on your own and you've got your own life where your parents exist, but they kind of exist on the periphery. And that's kind of how he treats his mom and dad at the beginning when he's Clark Kent and he gets the phone call and he's like, gotta go, I'm at work. So that part like feels real, that feels normal. You know, like my parents will call me and I'll be like, no, sorry, I have to go to work, I've got things to do, and then I'll forget to call them back. And then shit gets bad or something goes wrong or like you need something and you talk to your parents. And when they meet you again, or at least with mine, they don't act like suddenly it was a problem that I blew them off before. They're just there. And when Pa Kent is holding his son in his arms and he's just like, look, all we can do is give you the tools to make your own mistakes. And he's kind of teary-eyed because he sees that his kid's in pain, but he also recognizes that his kid has what it takes to solve it. I don't know, man. That just kind of hits me.
Yeah, I think the thing that really worked for me on that scene, and I don't know if I 100% agree with either of you about Superman's arc in this, that will be something that I'll have to, like, think on more as I watch it more. But the thing that really worked for me about that scene with Pa, again, is to take it as in conversation with these other Superman movies. Because you got the we'll just lump Reeve and Routh together because they are technically supposed to be the same Superman. You've got the Reeve thing where Brando is just telling him what he needs to do and what he needs to be, and like literally gives him like rules on how to be Superman. You are forbidden to mess with time, blah blah blah. And then you've got the Man of Steel films where Kevin Costner is telling him all what he needs to do and what he needs to be. Like, no, you can't save everyone, Clark. And then you've got, like, the Jor-El in that movie as well, telling him what his mission needs to be. And then it gets so bad that, like, Superman is so directionless and just needs to be told what to do left, right, and center that you get to BVS and Justice League... I can't remember if it was in Justice League. No, it was BVS. You had BVS where they have to bring Kevin Costner back just to tell him what to do even more. And it's so ridiculous. So to get this, where it's like, I'm not here to tell you what to do. I'm just here to tell you that you know what's best. Like, it's just so fucking refreshing to put Superman in the driver's seat in a
think
way.
You're giving that so much more credit than it deserves.
I don't think so.
Absolutely, just because you dislike the other stuff so much that you're giving this so much. It is the most generic any single Superman animated movie where he sits on the porch with Pa and talks about like, I don't know what to do, well, you make your own choices. Superman vs. Lee has this exact scene 1-to-1, and I really just liked it there as well, because it's exactly what you're talking about, where he's not ordering him or telling him what to do per se. He's just giving the fatherly advice scene, right? He's just giving that bit, and that's what every other version did as well. The only one that you are correct about, he actually gave him like direct orders, was the Donner movies. And even Donner movies got me more emotional, where Jor-El sacrificed himself because they had contrasted it up to it, and they built that relationship through basically 2 movies of Superman and his father, and this unable to connect each other, but there's this gap between them. Here Pa Kent turns up, but gives wisdom advice, and like I'm glad it worked for you, and I'm glad it seemed to work for a lot of people, so I'm clearly the outlier here. I just don't think it's earned. I don't think we spend enough time with this version of the Kents for me to care, and the time we do spend with it just feels like we're taking 2 really interesting characters and kind of dumbing them down to just, oh shucks, South stupid farmer trope, and that feels more insulting to me than trying to give them some. You don't need to do the gravitas thing. I agree with Steve. You don't need to do the suffering Jesus thing. You don't need to give him cosmic importance. Like, that's not inherently an interesting thing. But I do think you should give them at least some character, and I think this movie has so many elements working with it. There's so many things it's juggling that it just feels me like everyone is 2-dimensional. Everyone just feels like the most stock version of it. So on just a pure like sit down level, like sure, it flows over you, right? It gets through the motions, but it doesn't give me an emotional response. It doesn't make me invest in this as something more than just, well, that happened, that was a episode of a cartoon I watched or something. So that's my issue with it. And I recognize that's probably a personal issue with me, but it's something I've seen so many times that when that scene happened and he got on the porch, I was like, okay, here's the obligatory Pa Kent porch scene. Like, does that shit always happen?
See, I don't know. I think that you would be mad to say that this movie is not in conversation with the other Superman films, and to directly compare the fatherly advice scenes where those are much more giving, marching orders or telling him what he needs to do, versus this kind of saying you need to do what you think is best. I think is just
I think the overestimating of like the marching orders part is why it's sure, it's obviously like we're pretending that we've seen those things. It's just I don't think the other Pa Kent versions are giving like orders that are more than fatherly advice either. I
highly disagree, and I think
has him arm in arm, and he's like, well, you don't do things for you for like. I don't think that's orders. I think he's just talking to him like
he literally like Alfie. You're just wrong, because like he literally says, "Stop! Don't come get me and save my life on the highway." Like I was talking about
Donner Parkhead. I wasn't talking about Snyder. I was talking about Donner Parkhead when he's arm in arm and they're walking against the heart attack. Yeah, that's what I was talking about.
Well, again, I'm talking about the fact that these movies are in conversation with each other, and they're all like developing this particular relationship.
With Donner, though, to be fair, when he's in space about to turn back time, Marlon Brando shows up randomly in the sky, and he's like, "No, stop! You shouldn't do this." And then he does it anyway. Mm-hmm. And then in Superman 2, I don't remember if this is the Lester cut or the Donner. It has to be the Donner cut because Brando's not in the Lester.
Yeah,
cut.
he's on the.
Yeah, in the Donner cut, the arc of those 2 movies, I think, is very much Jor-El is his real dad. Jor-El tells him what he thinks his role in the world should be. Clark disobeys him, makes his mistakes, and then his father is still there for him at the end to give him back his powers, despite the mistakes he made. I don't know if maybe the connotation of orders or marching orders is a bit too much, but I do genuinely think the relationship between Clark and Jor-El in both the Snyder movies and in the Donner movies is a relationship of, I am not listening to the instructions my father have given me, and I will either own those mistakes or I will learn the error of my ways.
And again, I'm not disagreeing with that. I'm just saying that these movies that the previous fatherly mentor relationship
Yeah.
has been about telling him what he should or shouldn't do.
Yeah,
Whereas,
no, I agree with you. Yeah, I
whereas
agree with you.
this,
I think this is kind of explicitly like this Pa Kent is explicitly not what Jor-El has been.
yeah. That's all I'm kind of getting on, and like the same thing reflects for Jor-El in this movie. Jor-El is giving him explicit instructions, and he's just not going to follow those. He's making his own choices. He wants to be, he thought he was being what his parents wanted him to be, his birth parents wanted him to be, but he is being something different, and he's happier with the thing he thought he should be.
Smallville is another one, right? Like Smallville,
Oh
Jor-El
god, the fucking
is
Jor-El is a fucking like psychopath in
Yeah.
Smallville.
No, Jor-El in Smallville is explicitly like, you must do this, this, and this. Like, there's a whole season of Smallville where he's just in the fortress doing missions for Jor-El.
Yeah, no, that shit was. I stopped watching Smallville pretty early on. The fucking Kryptonian cave still bothers me.
It's not a good show. You should not watch it. I am not here for any of these revisionist assholes who are like, Smallville was good, actually. Sit the fuck down. No, it was not.
I'm agree with you 100% on that as well.
Smallville is trash. Anyway, but no, I do think that some of that is kind of explicit. I do want to talk a little bit about, because we don't have to get into the weeds of what it means, but I do want to talk a little bit about the whole, your parents actually sent you here to colonize and start a harem or whatever. One other problem I do kind of have with the relationship between Jor-El and the Kents in this movie is with the way Clark behaves, and the way he's so clearly the son of Ma and Pa Kent, it did kind of rub me weird that he was so emotionally invested in the message of parents he never knew. And I think there is something kind of interesting there, especially when you come from the perspective of like, he's an adopted kid. So he is going to kind of have this perfect picture of what his quote-unquote real parents are, especially if they give him some sort of meaning in his life. And that's not to say that he's discounting his Earth parents, but just has a different relationship with this image of them. And I don't think the movie does a particularly great job of contrasting the tension between that, of like, how can you say that you're doing all this to honor your Kryptonian parents when you are so explicitly doing this as an extension of who your ma and pa raised you to be? I don't think that's a problem. I think that's a good idea, and I think that is a tension in the movie that's worth exploring. I just wish there was more of it.
I'm of two minds on it. I could agree with you, Steve, but also we've just done so much with Jor-El in Superman movies in the past that I'm kind of glad that he's got a much more limited perspective. I was actually legit shocked when Supergirl showed up and they don't talk about this thing at all, because I'm waiting for like the fucking
that's a good point.
revelation moment in her movie where it's like, no, like on Krypton we just had harems. It was just like a normal thing. Why don't you do that on Earth? It's weird. Like monogamy is weird. Like it just to turn like the big, oh my god, it's so sick and gross, to turn it into just like, no, it's weird that you guys don't do that. You do kinda, because like Earth humans are always cheating on each other and stuff anyway. So like, why don't you just fucking own it, you fucking nerd? The fact that she just like says "bye, bitch" is like, I love her already.
I love that Supergirl so much. Just off the bat, she's great.
I'm excited for her movie as well. I really like Millie Alcock as an actress. I think she's gonna crush it. I like that. I like that she called her a bitch.
Yeah, was she your like fan cast before she even got like officially announced? That's so cool for you, man. I'm so happy for you for that. That's awesome.
She's so good.
That movie, I think I'm really excited for that thing, because there's a lot of these things with this DC thing that the one benefit of it, like again, even if I didn't like this movie, right, I've got a lot of issues with it. Why are we dealing with random Ultraman and the Engineer? Why don't you just use Bizarro and Metallo? Why are you allergic to using Superman characters? Naughty nitpicks, right? But the end of the day, if this is doing well and it lets more creatives make more original DC movies, and Gunn in the form of CEO who used to be, who is a director, right, who can protect scripts and stuff before we shoot things, I'm here for all of that stuff. I think that's a good direction going forward. I think that's different from the MCU. I think that's a really good place to get some good stuff. I think Lanterns will be good. I think Supergirl will be great. Like, I think all of this stuff is aiming to places. It's just frustrating for me that to get to that, I feel like I had to have a Superman movie designed to jumpstart a universe specifically designed to piss me off specifically. So it just feels so annoying when you're excited for everything after it, except for the one guy you really love, you know, like it. So that's more so why a lot of shit gets for me with things like this.
Do we want to talk? Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was mostly finished with it.
I just have a quick question. Quick one. So you are the Superman fan, and I'm not. The Engineer isn't like a asshole Superman villain. What's she from?
She's from the Authority.
Oh, okay. Huh.
So she's just a random fucking, but like she's not like how she is in the Authority here whatsoever. Like her powers are different, her mind is different, her personality. She's just Mercy Graves, right, in personality and how she acts, or she could have been a Batalla with boobs or something. Like Gunn chose the Engineer, I guess, because he wanted do an Authority movie that isn't happening. So now it's just this weird bit of history that an Authority character is in a Superman movie without any fucking purpose, and it could have been anyone else, right? That's what part of me is annoyed by this as well, with like how little we see with the Daily Planet and stuff like that, because my fear going forward with how that there's not going to really be a Superman straight sequel, right? We're going to keep doing different things for different filmmakers, and like that's objectively cool, but like I feel like I'm still waiting for that just Superman movie that's like Superman's mythology and isn't interested to get away from him so quickly, and that's where the Krypton stuff as well kind of rubs me the wrong way. Or like once we kind of strip down elements and we don't do the love triangle and we move past, it feels like we're in a hurry to skip all of Superman's unique iconography so we can get to other characters. And I'm just like, but that stuff's cool. Like, you're using a lot of Silver Age imagery, you're using a lot of Silver Age idea. But the whole point of the Silver Age was kind of like how melancholy up this guy was, that he had such a weird relationship with his co-workers, that he's led this double life, that he had such sadness for both his parents that died on Earth and then his parents that died in Krypton and stuff. And you don't have to do that stuff inherently, but when you're using the ideas of it, when you bring up in interviews how much of an inspiration All-Star Superman was for you, and then you don't engage with that material, it just makes me feel like you're being disingenuous, like you're just using it as imagery to get to the stuff that you really want to do. And maybe that's just me being like unfair to the critique, but it just feels like we're banking on the most popular versions of Superman, but we're not engaging with the themes of why those versions worked in the first place.
I will say, anytime anyone adapting a comic says they read a comic, I don't believe them unless it's Robert Pattinson saying he read Batman Shaman, because that dude's a freak and no one reads Batman Shaman but me. So anytime anyone is like, yeah, I based on this comic. No, you didn't. That was just what was in print at the store so you could pick it up, whatever. But to your point a little bit about the Day Planet and with what the role Gunn is playing, do we want to talk a little bit about the Gunn-isms in this movie? Because I think he actually does a really good job of toning down some of that early on. Like the needle drops are nowhere near as major as they are in the Guardians films, and he doesn't quite have the sort of like found family dynamic, but all of that gets turned up a little bit by the end when it seems like he's just kind of going back to his instincts. As far as the Gunnisms go, though, I think this is a movie where he's really clearly trying to evolve as a filmmaker a little bit. He's trying to do something different with the cinematography, and this is a big reason why I think the movie looks better than The Flash. And I think people who like post screenshots of the two and like, this is the same movie, I think they're being disingenuous, because the big difference between The Flash's cinematography and Superman's is the director. It's that Gunn is doing something with the style that represents a perspective in the action that The Flash just doesn't have. The Flash, everything is like a crappy wide shot. With this, there's at least an attempt to do something different, and it's something that he's kind of toyed with here and there, and I think it doesn't 100% work here, but it's an interesting style, and it makes for like that big action scene at the end where he's just beating up all of the Luthor Corp guard guys. I think that comes through really well. But all that to say, I think Gunn's relationship with his characters is interesting because he never relates to like what you'd expect. When he talks about Guardians 3, he talks about how the character that he relates to most is Rocket Raccoon. And part of that is because Guardians 3 is a big metaphor for creating something and then losing it because someone else controls everything. And it's just a big story about his relationship to Marvel and how he feels like a pawn in that cog. He feels like Rocket. Here, his into the story he's talked about in interviews is Crypto, because Crypto is based entirely on his dog. And they basically took a bunch of videos of his dog that he already had and then just changed the fur from brown to white to make him Crypto. And the way the dog behaves in the movie is the way his dog behaves at home. And the relationship between Superman and the dog, and then later when you get the Daily Planet crew actually showing up at the end of the action, those feel like the most Gunnisms to me. And I think that's where the movie can actually really thrive if he does a sequel. Because if he wants to continue this whole like found family concept that he does in everything else superhero related, doing that with the Daily Planet crew when all of them are just kind of clicking in the spaceship and anchoring it all on this really destructive ball of energy dog who's not a good boy, but you do still kind of love him, and loving him unconditionally even though he can't help himself being the heart of the movie for Superman. I really like all that stuff, and I think if he does come back for a sequel, if he channels that stuff into more Daily Planet, I think it would actually be really good.
See, I quite liked the dynamic with the Daily Planet crew.
I think they're great.
They're not the major
I like
focus.
they were there.
They're not the major focus or anything, but at the same time, when we talk about like Lex Luthor as president in the comics, the idea was that Superman wouldn't defeat him; it would be Clark with journalism to like finally get Lex. And that just never happened. Jeff Loeb just kind of got a hold of it and did his own thing and made Lex crazy and blah, blah, blah. This really did the thing of, like, Superman not only defeats Lex, like, with the bang pow energy, but the Daily Planet defeats Lex in the way that's going to actually have, like, more lasting consequences. It doesn't feel like... Like, I'm sure that when they need him again, they're just going to say, oh, lawyers or whatever. But maybe we'll get the, I bore a hole to hell, sold my soul to a demon, and then got out of prison. Maybe we'll get that kind of energy for Holt's return in something else. But just the fact that, like, when they're, like, the thing that just sold me on, like, this crew was not them all getting into the spaceship and, like, writing the story at the same time and all that. It was just before that, as the city is, like, being evacuated, they get the cosmic bullshit coming to destroy them, and Perry White is just sitting there in a chair looking at the fucking story laid out and all the evidence that they've gathered.
With a giant cigar in his mouth he never takes out. It's so good!
Like, it's just... That's... Again, just the vibes, man.
I adore the Daily Planet crew, but that's sort of what I mean is I feel like Gunn goes back into where he's comfortable, and it works when he's doing that stuff with them at the end. When Lois is piloting the spaceship, and she's dictating the story for Jimmy to write and publish on the website, and Perry is just listening with a giant fucking cigar in his mouth, and Steve Lombard's freaking out, and fucking Cat Grant is just bouncing her boobs. It's great. It's awesome.
Yeah, no, I really, really enjoyed that. See the spoilers going around, like, the real MVP of the movie is Lex's girlfriend. Like, yeah, no, for sure. And, like, her whole dynamic with Jimmy was really, really funny.
Okay, yeah,
I don't like that part.
No,
I didn't like that part.
I really, really was surprised at how they handled Jimmy, because when Gunn was announced, I was like, oh, he's gonna do we're gonna get silly drag queen fucking Jimmy Olsen finally. We're gonna get fucking Jimmy Olsen, who's like got the signal watch and is doing all those cool things. That's gonna be great, right? And then what we got for like the first time in his published history was like a mean Jimmy Olsen, like an asshole. Like, I don't understand the choice. Why is he so mean to this poor fucking girl? Like, it really distracted me. Like, and so like a decent chunk of the movie is dedicated to Jimmy investigating that instead of Lois and doing that thing. And I'm just like, I heard people in my theater laughing at me, and you say it was funny. I'm just like, I don't get what's funny. She's abused girlfriend. Like, yeah, she's ditzy and she's overbearing, but like, why is he such an asshole to her? He can't even play along for 5 minutes? Like, the fuck is his problem?
She's overly clingy. Like, I don't know what to tell you. Like, she's, you know, she's got, like, this really, like, crazy girlfriend energy. Like, she's obviously, like, a trophy girl for Lex, but just the way that she's talking to Jimmy, like, oh, how's your mom? Yeah, she's great. The one time you met her, she's got, like, crazy girlfriend energy, and it's, you know, he talks about, you're really gonna owe me for contacting her on this, because he knows he's gonna have to, like, deal with this just clingy personality. And I thought that was a pretty
gross, man. It just felt gross.
Okay. I don't know.
I wouldn't say like it felt like Gunn. It has a weird relationship with female characters. I think people who say that he just writes bad female characters are again being kind of disingenuous, because Gamora and Nebula in the Guardians movies are some of the best written female characters in any superhero movie, period. Like, their relationship in Guardians 2 is fantastic. And the tragedy of the Russo brothers is that they destroyed all of that for Gunn to have to rebuild it in the third one. And he does a great job trying to rebuild it from the scraps of what the Russo brothers left him. But at the same time, he writes a character like Mantis, who doesn't understand social cues and is kind of made the butt of the joke for everybody. And it feels a little inconsistent to make fun of Mantis the way he does and kind of be mean to her, while writing these two other characters with two very similar backgrounds that are just so much more mature than that. So it kind of takes you out of the movie a little bit. I don't think it's terrible with Mantis. I just think it's kind of weird and a little mean-spirited. And I have the same thing here with Tessmacher and Jimmy, where he does write good female characters. I think Lois in this is very good. I have no issues with Lois. But the relationship between Eve and Jimmy, where he is just kind of like dismissive of her in ways that just don't feel completely like rational, even for the clingy girlfriend thing. And even then, like, the clingy girlfriend thing is kind of played out at this point. But like, if at the end of the day your whole goal is to get Lex behind bars to save Superman or whatever, it just seems like the fact that he's struggling so hard with save the world or be mean to this girl feels a little bit weird to me. I don't think it's the most, like, it's not the most misogynistic thing in the world or anything, and this Jimmy is like clearly kind of a womanizer, which is hilarious on its own. But I do think, like, the way the comedy was put into the movie, where there would be like this really deep contrast of her in a bad spot and then going to him, and then him just kind of being monosyllabic or dismissive, just kind of rubbed me a little bit the wrong way. Mm-hmm. It's not terrible, but it did rub me the wrong way a little bit.
The thing that kind of, I'll let you talk about this, Ian, but the thing that kind of encapsulates is like a bit of the reason why then some of the scenes with Karen Sweat conversely felt a little hollow is you have him say, like, he does the whole, like, the punk rock, right, for loving everyone and believing in the good of everyone, and like, but it feels like the movie itself doesn't support that theme. Like, it feels like the movie itself is very cynical about people, and you can make a comment about that, but it doesn't feel like it's intentional. It just feels like there's almost two different movies happening sometime, where we have a Superman that is supposed to be like, he saves the squirrel and he doesn't want the kaiju to die, which I appreciate. Like, I appreciate that they added that line in for him with the intergalactic zoo and stuff. I would have liked to see in that. But like the whole thing, right? Like the whole thing with that is like, okay, so we're playing on cartoon logic. We're playing on like Saturday morning, like pure like good overalls. We're gonna have this geopolitical conflict and we're gonna resolve it in a very kind of like Captain Planet ass like way where things are resolved, and that's fine to do it on that terms. But then you have moments like the Eve stuff where it feels like Gunn can't help himself. Like he cannot be fully honest. Like he still has to be pretty mean when it comes down to it as a person. And that's just, as a creative, why I get like, I didn't think he was the right dude for this project kind of thing. But like that specifically stood out to me as just like, why is this in this movie?
Say though,
it's so like at odds with
I will say, though, I think the problem with that read is Superman thinks being good to people is punk rock. The world doesn't. And so Superman being the only guy who thinks this way, and everyone else being a little bit more morally on different ends of the spectrum doesn't bother me so much. But again, this is a movie that has a lot of narrative tensions that are interesting, that it's not interested in exploring. And so I think that's one of those things I chalk up to, like, this is an idea. It's not an idea that you care about, but it's an idea, and we're just going to put a pin in that and continue with the fun stuff.
Okay.
And I can see why that's a problem for people. But because I had so much fun with the fun stuff, it didn't bother me overtly.
Okay.
At least not on first watch.
I want to jump in here before I forget my point. Because I want to talk about, kind of go off a little bit of what Steve was talking about with, like, Mantis versus Nebula and Gamora, and with the way that Tessmacher in this contrasts with other female characters like Lois or Hawkgirl. And so I was having a conversation with someone, I think it was in the Discord server a couple weeks ago or a couple days ago, about, like, diversity doesn't just mean inherently positive portrayals of different groups. I don't think it's out of line, I don't think it's out of whack to have two really, like, well-developed and well-rounded, multi-dimensional female characters that have, like, a particularly tragic relationship with one another in the same movie as a character who's kind of a ditz and is the butt of jokes. I think that, like, both of those are people that exists in the world, and it is okay to show them. So I kind of have a similar thing with, I guess, this isn't probably a hill I want to die on. This wasn't that big a deal. I got a laugh out of it, and maybe I'm just more of a cynical person. But, like, I got a laugh out of it, and did still feel kind of like the temptation of the audience. Like, come on, Jimmy, just fucking give the girl a chance. She's beautiful, it's fine. But at the same time, I think it is fair. I think it is okay to do, like, a less developed or less, or maybe a more stereotypical, like, dumb blonde kind of character, and contrast it with more well-developed, more well-rounded female characters. I don't love Hawkgirl in this, but, like, she gets at least a moment, well, I'm not Superman, drops the guy.
That was sick.
Yeah. Oh, the wish fulfillment levels. Like, so I think it's acceptable to do. I don't think that the idea of, well, if every female character, every minority character isn't super well-rounded and well-developed, then you failed at writing them. Like, no, some people fit into these molds and these tropes better than others. Some characters are more three-dimensional than others. Like, what is Miss Tessmacher known for? Getting fucking yelled at, right? Like, that's... Name one thing about her that is not the fucking Lex Luthor yelling at her in the Reeve movies, right?
He saved Superman's life.
Yeah, no, fair.
Yeah. My thing is, because I think you're right, Ian. I don't want us to come across like just inherently having a ditzy, stupid character in a movie is the flaw. Because, for example, right, when she's taking the selfies, right, where he's fighting the Hammer Bravura and stuff like that's funny, right? Like, that's like a funny trope. I'm just like this ditzy character, like. And
then the fact that like that reveals that it was her plan, like her security blanket the whole time, I thought was really good.
No issue. The problem comes up, and I think the same thing happens with Mantis. It's not necessarily this character exists and we're making fun of it to an extent. It just gets to a point where it stops feeling funny and it starts feeling mean. Like, it feels like you're punching down to an extent when you spend a decent amount of time. Because if it was just that, right, and it was just left... But it's not like it's a short scene. It's a lot of jokes aimed specifically at that, and that's where it starts to tip over the edge and it just starts to feel like you're just being an asshole. You're not making me laugh here. It just feels like it's punching down kind of comedy in comparison to what you could be. The existence of Eve Tessmacher being shallow, stupid, clingy girlfriend no problem whatsoever. It's the fact that we spend a decent amount of jokes hitting at that in a way that feels just mean-spirited.
I mean, if that's how you felt about it, that's how you felt about it. Personally, I didn't have that read on it, so I'm not really gonna, sit here.
A lot of people laugh at it, right? Like it's not like you're alone in that.
Yeah, so I'm not gonna sit here and argue with you about it. Like conceptually, I think you're coming from a genuinely good place. But I just think within the context of the movie itself, not really reading into Gunn's views or the way he's written other characters. Outside of this film, I just thought it worked for what it needed to be in the story, and I thought it was good because it's functionally within the story. It played with your expectations, and I'm always a big fan of that. When you first are introduced to this character, you expect her to be nothing but the ditzy girlfriend of Lex Luthor. The movie goes out of its way to lull you into that false sense of security. And then, again, she's the MVP of the fucking movie, because without her, Lex doesn't really go to jail at the end of this, necessarily. She provides the proof, and she gives us the impetus for a lot of these other scenes, so I thought that was, a cool way to contrast her role as a character versus her role in the film.
Also, just sidebar, Lex Luthor throwing his ex-girlfriends into an interdimensional prison, fucking hilarious. It's so funny to me. It's so dumb, but it's so funny.
She wrote a blog about me. I didn't like that. And even the fucking guards are like, what idiot would write a blog about Lex Luthor while you're dating him?
It's so good. I love it. The only other thing I want to get to, if we have time, is the stuff with the fake countries going to war, because that's kind of stirred up a lot of conversation, and I feel like we do want to address it even a little bit. A lot of people have, I think, understandably looked at that and was like, Superman, anti-Israel. Superman, anti-Zionism. And part of the reason for that is everything that you're going to watch, you're always going to filter through what's going on in the world at the moment. So, it doesn't matter how vague the allusions are. If there's something that parallels it in the present, then you can kind of take the iconography of that and kind of align it with whatever your cause is. And that's why movies like this get away with doing stuff like that so much, because it's so vague. One of the things about, The Matrix, for example, is a trans allegory. It wasn't explicitly a trans allegory for a lot of people until the Wachowskis came out as trans sisters. But The Matrix is such a refined movie about identity that it always resonated with people who were trans implicitly, and they got that validation later when the directors came out that way. But again, the movie never says that. It's just all allegorical, and it's something that's going to be left to the viewer and their relationship to it. And so this is kind of no different in the sense that it's vague, but it's always going to be mirroring whatever's happening in the real world. Part of the problem with that is this is a thing that we do in Superman stories and comics all the time, and you could take the conceit of the conflict of the U.S. selling weapons to a country, and then that country using them in a war that is perceived as unjustified, and drop it anywhere along the history of the United States in the last 200 years, and it would still work, right? That's just a thing we have always done. I really struggle with people coming out and saying things like Superman, the 2025 movie, is anti-Zionist or anti-Israel, because I think what that is doing is it's taking a real important political issue and using it as fodder to justify your taste in cape shit. And that just implicitly bothers me. You don't need to justify your criticism on moral grounds when it's something that's serious like this, especially because if you want to engage with Palestine on film, there are hundreds of movies you could watch. There was a documentary that came out last year that still is, I think, is undistributed, called No Other Land. That was about this. There are so many short movies and full feature-length films that have come out in the last few years that actively engage with these ideas of Israel and Palestine that are worth considering. But the only time these people care about this issue
is when it's cape
is
shit.
when they can. It's when it's cape shit that makes them feel good for consuming cape shit, and that really rubs me the wrong way. I think people trying to make that argument are not helping anyone's cause, and I would seriously doubt that they believe in that cause if their only engagement with it is a cape shit.
I think that this kind of goes into issues that are wider than the scope of the movie, like hashtag activism and just the, like, moral grandstanding without actually giving a shit. You know, well, I stopped going to Starbucks and that's fighting Israel. And, like,
Right.
What level of investment does fucking Starbucks have in Israel? I'm not saying that they don't, but, like, what level, how much is this actually hurting them? Like, did you write your congressman about it? No. Like, I don't fucking write my congressman. I don't fucking read my shit. But, you know, just, like, there's other steps that are probably more important than, you know, not going to Starbucks or McDonald's. I tend to find, like, you know, there's been studies, of course, about, like, boycotts general. If they're too wide and too nebulous, don't really have an effect. You need to do more, like, localized boycotts and stuff, so... That's neither here nor there. That's outside the scope of the movie. Yeah, watching this and seeing people react to it with, like, this Israel-Palestine context, I mean, it's hard not to, but I think you're more in the line, Steve, of it just kind of fits with the vibe of what we're talking about, and you gotta, like, back this up. You know, the script, James Gunn's made, like, very clear that we don't start shooting until we have a finished script. They started shooting over a year ago. They presumably had a finished script before that didn't undergo any massive changes. This is a pretty, like, fundamental concept to the, like, plot of the film. It's not something that they could have just added on top. Conceivably, as the Palestine stuff was coming to not a head, but becoming more relevant and more polarizing again, they could have decided to lean into things a little bit more. But that's hard to do without getting into stereotypes and coming off as, like, anti-Semitic or whatever. So, that all being said, yeah, I think you're right. I think it is just written to be generic country, and it just resonates really powerfully right now because of how much generic country that the U.S. is selling weapons to go commit genocides on our behalf so that we can claim land for oil. Just really, really captures onto the current moment, and I don't necessarily have a problem with that, though. Like, yeah,
No.
if that's your only way of engaging with it, that's probably a problem, but if you're seeing that in this film, well, maybe that's a good thing.
Well, and here's the thing, right? Like, if you're seeing that as part of the political context that this movie is coming out in, that's one thing. That's one perspective to come at it from. My problem is just when people's conversation about a thing goes from, here are my thoughts on it, to, here are my moral platitudes I'm going to use to shut down other people to make myself seem like I care about something, right? Like, you see this a lot with stuff like the new Captain America movie or the Marvels, where they're like, yeah, the Marvels sucked as a movie, or Captain America Brave New World was a terrible movie. And people are like, oh, you just hate women and black people. That's what it is. You just hate women and black people. Or you could say, like Alfie says, like, this is not a good movie. And people will be like, oh, so you like Israel? Okay. Like, that...
I literally had someone tag me like that, Steve. I literally had someone at me.
It's just that thing where I'm like, if this is what you're doing, you do not care about this issue, stop pretending like you do. And if your only way of seeing real serious political issues is exclusively through cape shit, then I beg you to get offline and touch grass.
Not agree.
Yeah, I agree completely.
Not agree. Okay, so that's the big, like, political thing. Alfie, did you have anything more you wanted to talk about regarding the Israel-Palestine parallels?
Not particularly. I think you two both kind of covered it.
Okay.
I think just on a base narrative level, I don't think it's that compelling of an element of the film on its own. It's just kind of there to get the ball rolling. Like, I don't have any strong feelings on it aside from what you guys talked about. Like the outside reaction to it is more interesting. What I say here, it's just like the most generic. Like, again, it feels like any time Baravia is mentioned in like a Superman comic and stuff, it's always kind of dull. It's just kind of, all right, let's just get to the
changes
interesting part.
like what the national identity is. Sometimes it's more Arab, sometimes it's Israel, sometimes it's fucking whatever. Yeah.
So that's my stance. It's like it's just like again, we get it.
Yeah.
That's all it needs to be.
Yeah. Okay. The one thing I want to talk about that we haven't really discussed much is the effects, not just like the cinematography, but like particularly the visuals as they applied to the impossible situations and the effects and stuff in this. I really, really enjoyed it from that point of view. I think my favorite someone's gonna burn up a couple motherboards because we got some rendering to do was the escape from the pocket dimension with just the craziness of like the proton river, and they're trying to get out before they get sucked in the black hole, and like Crypto's there, and there's fucking Metamorpho floating around just as a head because he used up all his stuff becoming acid, and just the baby crying and Crypto being chaotic as shit and like kind of low-key sabotaging the mission because of Mr. Terrific, like the flying orbs. There's just so much cool shit on screen all at the same time, and I thought it looked really, really good. I was really happy with it.
Yeah, I thought the effects looked great. And I mean, in particular, the fact that Crypto is such a major focal point of the movie and he looks terrific.
Mm-hmm. Like, it's one of those things where he looks fake at times, but it's because you just know that a dog can't do that, right? Like, it's
right.
It's that thing of with No Way Home when they have Daredevil catch the snow globe, and then you find out, oh, actually it was a brick, but we decided that was like too politically charged, so we went in post and changed it to a snow globe. And it's like, would it have fucking broken a window? But whatever. Well, like, no one clocked it because someone could catch a snow globe. They could have actually done that in live action or whatever. But no one clocked it, and I think there's the same thing with Crypto here. Like, he's CG the whole time, but like when he's doing the flying stuff and whatnot, it's more obvious than when he's just like sitting on Lois's lap in the T-sphere. Even though you get like arguably the same level of close up on him.
Also, one last sidebar on that: Lex Luthor's evil plan to make Crypto chase super squirrels. So good.
Oh my god, my favorite.
I like that they've got little capes on them.
So cute.
My favorite Lex line in this whole fucking movie, right, is, I have no idea what you're talking about. Sip, little white dog, red cape. What? Just so fucking mean.
Such a dick. I love him. Sorry, continue.
Yeah.
So, on the visual effects, I agree. I don't think the CGI itself, like the model, everything. The visual, I had no issue with it. I think that looked really solid. I think they worked really well. They clearly spent time and let them have their things. The issue I had with it was just, I feel like Gunn, when he shoots those action scenes, kind of doesn't lend them any weight, and a lot of the time when he does like the big fancy, like when Lex is in the fortress, right, and you got the engineer cutting up all the robots and like the blade flies past his face and he's supposed to be like a cool moment, right, because he's not unflinching. I just can't help but looking at it, it's like, this is all like technically really impressive, but the way you're shooting this is making this feel really weightless. It feels like this isn't interacting with reality in a way. I think the kaiju was a good example of this, where like the kaiju puts his foot down and like creates debris and stuff, and you see on location like they add things and they do make an effort to make it feel a little bit more tangible. Like the Michael Bay Transformers movies, for as many problems they had, they did a really good job of like integrating the big crazy CGI things with like practical impact on the thing. I think just a lot of this movie, when we get up like an extreme close up and when he does like the shaky, like the camera's not shaky, but like it will be kind of jittery at points when like people get hit and then move to the next angle and stuff like that. It makes me feel a lot of the weight is lost. It makes me feel like a lot of the impact isn't there. Sometimes it is. Sometimes the impact is really pronounced. But when we get like visual stuff, like at the end scene where Superman takes out the Lex goons, that felt really disjointed for me as an action scene comparison, because when we show the goons then landing on the ground, it's lit completely differently. Like it feels like we've just cut to a separate scene.
I would argue
that
I
like
think
it was
that might have been
integrated.
like a reshoot moment.
Yeah. Just to show
'cause-
that they didn't kill them or something.
Yeah, no, like legit, because they that's become such a thing. I think ever since Man of Steel, like no one gave a shit
For
about
sure.
like fucking Christian Bale could throw people across the room in like Batman Begins and Dark Knight, and no one really like, oh, they're clearly dead. But with fucking Man of Steel, ever since there were people in those buildings, right? No. Clearly not. Like, no one thought about this until after the movie came out.
Yeah.
And so ever since then, like, we've been so self-conscious about it. So, like, you know, he laser eyes and throws people down and stuff. So, like, we have to show that they're still alive. Which...
I wouldn't be surprised about that either.
Yeah. For me, I think the thing I just really want to harp on about the visuals is, again, Two Guns credit as, like, the studio head here for DC... with this insistence on we're not going to do stuff until we have a finished script. We're not going to shoot anything unless we know what we're shooting. And, you know, that does still leave room for reshoots, which is a perfectly normal thing, of course. I do really appreciate that because one of the big problems in the VFX industry that keeps getting talked about but nothing's being done about is, like, the Marvel crunch for these VFX studios. How Marvel will come to a studio and be like, all right, you guys are the lowest bid, so we're going to have you do our effects, and, you know, we're going to be giving you stuff, you know, 2-3 weeks before the movie's set to release in theaters, and you've just got to get it done. And it's given their, you know, the effects houses a really bad name. People have been just absolutely dunking on Marvel movies for, like, the last 7 or 8 years now. Not even, you know, pre-Endgame, like, you know, even Black Panther, which I like, gets kind of ragged on for that final fight with T'Challa and Killmonger, because the visual effects just feel so rushed and so, like, last minute, and everything's, you know, looking kind of clunky because they just don't have the time for it. To have such a imaginative world and so many crazy things on screen all at different times, and for it coming to a head in the Proton River in the Pocket Dimension, I thought that was just really, really great. That it really did look good. It didn't feel rushed. It didn't feel cheap like The Flash or yada yada. It really just felt polished. And I just really appreciated that about it.
Supergirl also has the same benefit where they already finished shooting the movie, and we're like over a year away from it coming out. So all that time is post-production and visual effects.
Yep.
And this movie was very similar, where they wrapped filming like summer of last year, and then had a whole year for post-production and visual effects. Which is not a thing
just
that
wrapped yesterday, and they've got a whole year for that as well.
Yeah, exactly. So, like, you've got all of the big blockbuster movies like the Marvel Studios stuff that's all doing things in crunch time. But you look at like this, or you look at the Dune movies, or you look at like anything Nolan does when he's using visual effects, and they recognize, number one, that you have to film the stuff with the intention of, this is where the visual effect is going to go, and here is how the real world stuff is going to interact with it, and here is how you make the lighting consistent and all that. You don't do what Marvel does, which is, in many cases, decide on the entire arrangement of the scene in post-production.
Yep. 100%. And so it's interesting to, like, credit this movie for doing just, like, basic homework and stuff, but
right.
It doesn't exist in a vacuum, right? Like, that's the thing that I think... you could say that the movie is just average or has, like, flaws and stuff, and I'm not necessarily gonna, like, disagree with you on every single point and, like, lay out all my arguments. What I'm gonna say is it just feels so refreshing because it's not coming out in a vacuum. It's coming out within the context of Superman movies before it, DC movies before it, superhero movies as they exist right now, what the MCU has done to just the process of filmmaking. All of these things matter in how you interpret and watch this film, and it is a response, in some ways explicitly, but in many ways just implicitly, to the changing landscape of this as popular culture. Uh-oh.
And I think you are really seeing that, like you mentioned, with the interaction you had at the grocery store. Like I've talked to people in everyday life for the last couple of days and leading up to the movie that were as excited for or enjoyed this as much as any superhero movie of the last 10, 15 years. Like I haven't felt this much excitement about a movie like this since around like Dark Knight Rises.
Yep, I would agree with that. It's, you know, like I talked to you, I think, a lot about it, Steve, and a little bit Alfie. Alfie was just so negative all the time that I was like, I don't want to fucking talk about this movie with Alfie at all. I considered like messaging like, Alfie, do you really want to be on the show tonight? Because you're just gonna bring me down, man.
I didn't want to. I hope I've been proclaiming my points in a way that's at least not coming off as an asshole, right?
No, man, like, I think there's always that distinction. You are probably the person I know who has the biggest discrepancy between actually talking to and talking online. Like, it's not just tone. Like, literally, when you are typing on a keyboard, I think you become a different person.
Okay.
And I mean that in maybe a loving way. Maybe I'm just, like, nagging you or something. I don't know. But, like, I just, you know, I've felt, like, a cautious optimism about this movie, but it was within the context of seeing just a lot of, within my own personal circle of social media and stuff, seeing just a lot of, like, hate and negativity to it. But then when I would have interactions with people, like the weekend, or the Friday before I was leaving work, and one of the guys was like, are you gonna go see the new Superman? I'm like, yep, on Sunday. And, you know, I came in Monday morning, he's like, oh, it was so good. I'm like, yeah, it was. And we started, you know, sitting there riffing on the movie, talking a little bit for a couple minutes. And it's just so fucking refreshing to have. Like, I was cautiously optimistic, but then upon actually getting to see the movie, I really did have a good time. It's not perfect. I don't think I had... What was the thing I saw someone saying about Dark Knight the other day? Gen Z, by and large, doesn't really care for The Dark Knight, which is weird to a lot of us millennials who in 2008 saw the face of God.
Yeah.
So, like, I didn't
Which is the correct opinion.
Yeah, that's exactly what... If it was a different time, like, I didn't have, like, that level of an experience with it, but I felt so refreshed. You know, we talked about Batman Returns a couple weeks ago, of, like, you know, how fun is it to just have a Batman movie that's not trying to be, like, some huge statement on the character or whatever, but it's just trying to tell, like, a fun, you know, kid-friendly Batman story. I really appreciate that about it, and I have fun with it, which is basically really all the movie's trying to do. And I don't think, like, this is as, without trying to throw shade, I don't think this is as shallow as something like Batman Forever, but I think it's more along the lines of that wheelhouse than, you know, trying to be filmic the way the Snyder movies were. And your mileage may vary on the approach to direction you feel there.
Yeah. I mean, I think this is kind of like an ice cream cone of a movie, you know? Like, you shouldn't have it every day. It's probably not good for you. But in the moment, it sure tastes good, and I'm not complaining.
Funny you say that, because one of the things I have enjoyed about this movie is all the extra Superman shit that's been coming out. Like, I get to enjoy. So, like, I did eat the special Dairy Queen Superman ice cream that they had.
Let's go!
That was good. It was really good. I enjoyed it.
Yeah, exactly. It's just ice cream. Like, you know, like, Ian, to your point, right? Like, I saw this movie on a Friday, and then... You want to know what the rest of my weekend was? It was David Cronenberg's The Shrouds. It was Milos Forman's One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. And it was Wong Kar-wai's Chungking Express, right? Like, there is space for these deep, really well-crafted, great films. And then sometimes I just, like, want ice cream. And I'll, like, watch Halloween Kills or Superman. And I'll have a good time.
Yeah. I don't think there's anything wrong with that, and I think, like, for a long time, there was this perception that, like, the MCU used to really be that, and so, for a while, there was, like, the argument of, well, the DC movies are going to be more about, like, films, and then those films were really fucking bad, so it's just like, well, the DC movies are for the fans, but the fans weren't watching them because they were failing financially. Just like the fucking, like, damage control that existed around the DCEU was something, and it just feels nice that like this movie seems to be resonating with people in a way that it doesn't seem to like need damage control. It doesn't like you like it or you don't. I'm sure there's gonna be some culture war over it between like the Snyder cultists and stuff. But I'm kind of just happy to just have a fun Superman movie. I told Leah that I'm gonna go see it again with my mom. She's like, I want to see the Superman movie. I'm like, well, maybe, but the thing is, you don't sit well in a theater, and you don't like movies with, actual people that much. So we'll get to it eventually, Leah, I promise. But you know what? You can watch the live action Supergirl show. And she's like, oh, okay. Been trying to get her to watch it for the last couple weeks because she, as much as I like the fight scene with Supergirl versus Darkseid and Batman Superman Apocalypse, I can only watch it so many times. Just need some variety.
That's awesome that she wants to watch that so much though.
She just likes Supergirl all of a sudden. Like it's really just, it has to be a girl. Like it's really funny with her where, we'll get like, this is the problem with like the sexism inherent in language, right? Where it's like, grab your stuffy guy and let's go. It's a girl, Dad. I'm like, okay, my bad. Grab the girl owl and let's go. It all has to be girls, not boys. So yeah, I don't know if she'll like Superman very much, but maybe when Supergirl shows up at the end, she'll love it.
The last 30 seconds will be for her.
Yeah. God, I was so shocked by that scene. That was so fucking cool to see. And I love her, like, the fact that you just have, like, 10 seconds of her with Crypto, and it explains that dog's entire personality.
I just can't get over. I was just saying to myself when I got home after the movie, I'm like, thanks for watching my dog, bitch. It's so good. I love that so much.
My dog.
I love her. I'm not even like a big Supergirl fan, but I love her in this.
I'm telling you, man. I knew she'd cook. I knew she'd be great.
She's a good actress. As boring as House of the Dragon is, she's a good actress.
I just want to establish how good it is that she came all the way back to Earth just to get Crypto so she can go out and party more.
Yep.
Oh, yeah.
She's a mess. I love it. Which is, I mean, that's how Woman of Tomorrow opens, right? She's in a bar getting wasted.
Yeah.
She's in a bar getting wasted. It's awesome.
Right? And it's so good that it's, like, not... essentially it could be, but it, like, leads itself into the proper end of the movie. So it could have just been an after-credits scene, but it would have felt, like, less special if it had been, right? So I thought it was really good to just get it in such a fun way. I also really like that the after-credit scenes for this are just fun little moments and don't have anything to do with, like, now I'm going to be the one in the next movie kind of thing. It's just, man, I can be such a jerk sometimes.
I love that the mid-credit scene is Superman and Krypto looking at the Earth. I loved that promo still, and I like that it made its way into the movie.
Yeah, no, for sure. I can be such a jerk sometimes.
So good. I love him.
Yeah, good movie. I really enjoyed it. So let's go ahead and go on to ratings. I think we're about done with everything for this. I'm excited for the new chapter in the DC universe, not led by The Rock.
The hierarchy of power did change.
Yep. Sure did.
Apparently in the mural in this movie, someone spotted it. Pierce Brosnan is still Dr. Fate in this universe.
I mean,
that's fun.
I could dig that. That could be fun if you just get like some. Fuck it, the casting was just too good. We're just gonna keep that person. We're not gonna.
Peacemaker is still in canon with this universe, even though it was canon with the old one and Aquaman showed up. So, like, I think bits and pieces of that can still cross over.
Yeah. I don't mind that. It seemed like they were kind of teasing that for a bit in the movie, where it's like they specifically say the other universe as if there are only two. And presumably, with the way Peacemaker's set up, that's going to, like, lead into how it connects to keeping stuff from the DCEU. And if that's the case, yeah, fine. I don't have a problem with if you think this thing worked, this casting choice, or this XYZ movie or whatever was good. Yeah, fine. I'm cool with that.
Yeah.
That, though, would have been such a, like, big dick energy moment if when Ultraman took off the mask, it was just Henry Cavill. Wouldn't have made any sense within the context of the movie, but, like, holy shit, the audience would have lost their mind.
That would have been pretty fucking funny. No, I mean, as long as we're not going to pull some, like, Disney Plus Loki bullshit where we created an entire property just to explain why there's a different universe, I'm fine with them just reusing shit and going with it.
Yeah. I mean, I hope that's not what Peacemaker is, but that seems tangential to what Peacemaker is for season 2, at least, whenever that comes out. Okay, let's go ahead and go on to ratings for this. I'll go first. I think I really enjoyed this movie, so I probably wouldn't get this high with, like, a more critical mindset, but again, it doesn't exist within the vacuum, and so I really appreciated it for what it did and when it has come out. So this may change over the years, but for right now, I'll give this 4.5 out of 5. Just terrible dog owners.
I really like this movie. I mean, I've got a lot of problems with how it works by the end, but I forget all of them when David Cornsweet just smiles at the camera, and I feel like that's kind of the essence of the whole thing, right? It's big, it's bombastic, it's corny, it's kind of messy, and that's kind of what I like about Superman. So I'll give this 3.5 out of 5 A1 punches to the face. Or
you
1A,
took my
whatever it
one.
was.
You took my thing. That's the Lexion I really love.
I fucking love it.
I like
I
that
still
bit a
can't
lot.
get over the fucking. He just has a code to punch Superman in the dick. That's so funny to me. Anyway,
For me, to go back to you guys' ice cream. This movie feels to me that it was definitely an ice cream, but it was an ice cream flavor I don't like, and then the name tag on it when they handed it to me said "fuck you, Alfie." So like, that's kind of my perspective on the whole thing. I'm glad people have enjoyed it. I'm glad people like Superman, and I hope to reap the benefits of that by maybe we can get like a video game or something with the improved positive reception. So I'll take that. But as a movie onto itself, it didn't work for me really at all, so I'm gonna give it 2 out of 5 T-spheres because Mr. Terrific was really cool.
Okay. I just want to say that I think it's really interesting that you've got such a negative perspective on it, but yet like a 2 out of 5 is not a terrible rating. It's like literally half a point away from being like average. So I don't know. I think that just confirms it's the greatest movie ever made.
Well, it's because I can be a lot of the things that like if I really went down a rabbit hole, I could like go line by line and being like I don't like this, etc., etc. But that's like just so nerdy, and it's such like a mindset like I've grown out of a lot with this thing. Like I don't really want to just look nerdy nitpick cinema sins shit, but just on a craft level, there are things against it. Like, but I think I'd be dishonest to pretend to people that like it's something as bad as The Flash or something that's just like completely a dumpster fire like Morbius or something. Like it's not that, right? There's clearly good performances that are breaking through. There's clearly things here. It's just a lot of elements that specifically didn't work for me bring it to this. That's why I give it that rating, right? Like I'll talk a lot of shit and like it's fun to dissect it in minutia Discord amongst friends. But if I'm giving it an actual critical perspective, right, I'm going to be an adult about it.
Okay. No, that's fair. That's fair. All right, everyone, thank you so much for watching. Until next time, I'm the Philosopher.
And I am the champion of the oppressed.
and I am being oppressed by people who don't like Superman.
And we are your geeky gentlemen, and we will be discussing things.